good afternoon again, and thank you for joining us during Friday afternoon for this information session. I know most of you have arrived here from our social media channels, and the purpose of conducting these sessions is to inform you a bit about how the application process looks like when you apply through us to study in countries like Sweden and Finland. We're planning on covering both master's and bachelor's level programs in these countries with a bit of a focus on the master's programs because our primary market has always been postgraduate applicants. And we personally have this belief that yes, you can study your bachelor's in a foreign country, but if you are just after school, kind of a student, they can sometimes be better options available to you locally in Sri Lanka. So the idea is you complete your bachelor's, gather some working experience, and then you can look forward to, studying your master's elsewhere, or even make use of one of these point-based migration systems to migrate overseas. So we'll still, I understand there can be, some applicants who want to go there for your bachelor's level program. So I will cover about bachelor's a bit as well. So to talk a bit about us, I know, as I mentioned before, most of you have arrived here from our socials. We've been operating in Sri Lanka for the last 16 years, fairly long time. And we are among the first two firms in Sri Lanka to recruit students for countries like Sweden. I remember we had another firm doing the same thing around the same time. I'm talking about 2010. But then again, back then, the number of students who were choosing Sweden was definitely below 50. And if you think about Finland, which is one of the most popular destinations in Sri Lanka nowadays, I can certainly assure that we're the first in the business. We've been doing it 16 years straight. We have seen all the changes from Finland being a country that offered entire free education to international students. And they introduced their tuition fees in 2019, and still they continue to offer very generous scholarships just until the last year. So I no longer see Finland as an option to apply for a scholarship, but then it can be a good option to someone with a fairly enough level of capital to go there and survive on their own until they start transforming themselves and obtain some sort of a skill set that Finland requires. So there's a bit of a transformation process involved, and we'll talk about that as we go along. And we have managed to secure over 1 billion rupees worth of scholarships. Again, fairly large number for such a small firm like ours. And we have processed more than 2,000 applicants for all of these countries combined, Sweden, Finland, and we also have processed some for Norway and Estonia. So we know what we are doing for sure. Continuing forward, I would like to, talk a bit about our background. I already explained about, our history, 16 years straight, and one of the first two firms to promote education in Sweden, and definitely the first to promote education in Finland. And I'm sometimes surprised by how popular it has become lately, because when we started, I can give you one short example from not even from the beginning, like in the year of 2020, that was the last year they had physical entrance tests in New Delhi. I remember there was about 6 bachelor's applicants. I know the exact number because 5 of them are our clients. And they had to go to New Delhi, sit for this entrance test, organized at a separate examination center. And there was only about 6 students. 5 of them were ours, and there's one student we don't know about. The whole idea is, even in the year of 2020, the number of those who chose Finland for bachelor's level programs was around 6. And now they have a huge Sri Lankan community, good enough to even, run cultural concerts. I saw Bhati and Santush, for example, performing there last year, and it was full of people. And I'm amazed by how, it has going to become one of kind of mainstream destinations. So the important most thing, the reason why we conduct these sessions in advance is because we always have a cap of students. The idea of a cap is it's a self-imposed cap. It's not like we cannot only process this many number of students. It's self-imposed cap because we want to handle the maximum number of applicants we can personally pay attention to. We don't outsource our processes. We personally pay attention to each and every application. And some of you may already have an idea about how short the application period is for these countries, especially for Finland. If you think about applying for a public research university, the average time duration, the application period will remain open is just 2 weeks. This year, it was from 7th of January all the way until 22nd January. And there are some universities like Helsinki and Aalto. They usually have the application period kept for about 1 month, still about 30 days. So there's always a cap of students we can effectively handle. We don't really believe in processing students for universities or for applied sciences at the master's level because we believe in a research-oriented environment. So our services at the master's level are entirely focused on these 9 different public research universities in Finland. And we also apply for multiple universities in Sweden, and all of them are public research universities anyways. So what are the requirements to apply? Normally, I'll first clear up the bachelor's applicants. The general requirement is to have your A-levels. So if you have passed all your subjects with at least S passes, you can generally apply for a bachelor's program in Sweden. It's a different story whether you will be able to admit or not, but then the general requirement is to have 4 S passes. And when it comes to Finland, our process all works in a way we let the students choose what they want to do. If they want to stick to Sweden, it's fine with us. But especially if they have a class like a first class or second upper, we highly encourage them to add Finland as well. And it will not cost them anything extra because our charge is more like a flat rate, even if you apply for Sweden, or even if you decide to add both Sweden and Finland into the process, it's going to be the exact same cost in more. But the difference is to apply for Swedish university for a bachelor's or a master's, as long as you have passed your general English as a subject, you don't need any English proficiency score for, I would say, 99.99% of all the programs. The only exception is there are some programs like linguistics where they specifically ask you to produce some sort of an English proficiency test score like IELTS or PTE. I don't know if these requirements will change for next year, but highly unlikely. So the general requirement to apply for Sweden for a bachelor's is to have 4 S passes. But if you want to apply for Finland, we want you to have IELTS score. Like normally the general requirement is 5.5 for each component. If you want to take up PTE, having a score of 59 will do. And on top of that, we also encourage you to take up the exam, what we call SAT or SAT, because that'll further increase your chances of being able to receive an admission for a Finnish university. Having said that, it's not like all Finnish universities require you to have IELTS or SAT. But then, as I mentioned before, we are very specific about the kind of clients we handle. It's because we want everyone to benefit from this. We want us to successfully be able to process you. And at the same time, we expect the best for you as well. So we only apply for the kind of universities that requires you to have an IELTS score at the bachelor's level in Finland. In Sweden, it's a different story. You don't need any IELTS score. If you have passed your general English as a subject, you can apply. And when it comes to masters, the general requirement for Sweden is to, again, have a bachelor's degree. If you have a class for your bachelor's, at least a second lower or higher, you'd have better chances to receive an admission. Or even, let's say you don't have a class, but some of an above the average GPA, 2.8, 2.9 out of 4, you can still receive an admission without any issue. If your GPA is lower than that, you can still apply. It's not like you cannot apply and receive an admission. but then we have to individually assess your ability and the type of programs we apply in order to ensure you receive an admission. When it comes to Finland, if you want to add Finland simultaneously into the process, obviously you need to take up IELTS. The general requirement is 6.5 is 6 for each component. If you want to take up PTE, it's 62 overall with no component less than 59. So I'll summarize the process. If you want to apply for a bachelor's, you need 4 S passes to apply for Sweden. If you want to add Finland at the same time, we prefer if you can take up IELTS or PTE and obtain a score of 5.5 for each component for IELTS, and if it's PTE, 59 for each component. But then if you want to apply for Sweden alone, there's no IELTS requirement. When applying for masters, the general requirement is to have a bachelor's with a class. But in case if you do not have a class, but somewhat of a GPA that is above the average, you can still apply with confidence and we can try to secure an admission. But if your GPA is on the lower side, talk to us. We can try to individually assess you and confirm if we can go ahead or not. And the most important thing about the length of the bachelor's, especially when it comes to Finland, about Sweden, is that if you want to apply for a Swedish university with a bachelor's from a Sri Lankan public university or any UGC approved local university like NSBM, for an example, that has to be 4 years in length. They no longer allow you to apply with a 3-year degree alone for Sweden. The requirement is you have to either have a 4-year bachelor's, or if your bachelor's is 3 years in length, they want you to have completed at least 1 year of master's level studies. But again, this is applicable only for those who have completed their bachelor's in Sri Lanka from a UGC approved local university. Let's assume you have completed your bachelor's from one of these places where they deliver British degrees offshore. This requirement does not apply to you if you have completed a British degree in Sri Lanka, or Irish degree, or an Australian degree, or New Zealand degree from New Zealand. This 4-year requirement does not apply because it's always the country of the qualification that matters to them. When it comes to Finland, there's no such a requirement. You can also apply with a 3-year degree as long as you have a class. You stand fairly good chances. And the other point is you are able to pay a tuition fee and study in case if you are admitted without any scholarship. But our advice, honestly, nowadays is we no longer consider these countries as good options for scholarship. So if you want to secure like 100% scholarship, and if you want to go through us, we recommend you not that we cannot apply, we can still apply, but the favors are not on your side. The idea is all these countries are currently going through some kind of an economically turbulent situation where they no longer can afford to award you with very generous scholarships like they used to do. You do still have chances. For an example, recently we received, just yesterday or day before, we received a scholarship from Örebro University in Sweden, 100% scholarship. I checked the scholarship recipients list and understood there's only 5 full scholarships that have been granted this year, and one of them, the only Sri Lankan applicant, is actually a client of ours. That's the idea. I mean, the chances of receiving a 100% scholarship nowadays from one of these countries will be like about 5%. 95% chances you have to go in there as a fee-paying applicant. So our advice is to prepare to pay a tuition fee. The average tuition fee range in these countries is between 10 to 15,000 euros on average. So that comes to about 3.6 million all the way until to 5.5 million. In Sweden, you are expected to pay for the first semester, so you pay half of this. And in Finland, you are generally expected to pay for the first year. But still, in Finland, you do have some sort of early bird scholarships, 2,000, 3,000 euros, sometimes 5,000. But no longer you can, apply with confidence and expect 100% scholarship, for example. So we recommend you to have sufficient tuition fees, at least for the first year or year and a half. And the other requirement is about GMAT. GMAT is not, again, It's not a compulsory requirement because there are plenty of universities you can apply without this. But let's assume you have a bachelor's degree, which is first class related to management. You have done your IELTS and you want to further increase your chances of being able to secure a scholarship. You can work on securing a GMAT score because that'll make you stand out from the rest of the applicants. And there are universities, for example, Aalto University in Finland, where they have some business analytics and mostly business related programs where GMAT is a compulsory requirement. Again, this applies only to those who want to apply for some of these, high ranked universities related to business. Anyone else, whether you come from a technology background, engineering background, science background, GMAT is not applicable to you. Even for those who come from business background, GMAT is completely optional. There are plenty of universities we can try without having a GMAT score. But then, having GMAT, especially if you already have a first class degree or so, if you want to further increase your chances, want to be on that, top 0.01% of applicants, completing GMAT will definitely allow you to stand out from the rest. So that'll also at the same time increase your chances of being able to secure a full scholarship of some sort. But if you are if you have an average GPA, and if you simply want to get into one of these countries with or without a scholarship, spending your money and time on GMAT is not really required. And the last one is about the ability to pay remaining tuition fees if admitted for a partial scholarship. So you must have sufficient amount of money. Let's assume you get a 50% scholarship, if you're lucky enough nowadays. You still have to have the remaining amount of tuition fees for a considerable long time, at least for a year or a year and a half. So that will give you some room to get adopted into these countries. So I would like to talk about disadvantage of Nordic countries. I understand there's been plenty of discussions around this topic. The biggest one we see, the fact that they have different languages. So there's a language barrier and a serious one. Because if you think about a country like Sweden, it's not like they do not have opportunities. They do have plenty of opportunities, especially in fields like engineering, science, R&D, ICT and all. But then the moment you come out of these science and technology related occupations, for most of the business related occupations, and most of the customer facing roles, although most Swedes speak English, they expect you to speak Swedish. So there's no other way. You have to learn the language and you have to put in extra efforts to learn the language within the time you're there. So learning an additional language, especially in the middle age, can be challenging for the vast majority of us. The second one, also something we cannot control, harsh climate during some months of the year or most months of the year. And it's also something we cannot control. You have to get used to it, whether you like it or not. Third one is actually no longer applicable for the most because the idea is years back, we used to receive these some sort of complaints from some of our students saying, Shamaga, I'm the only person of color in my faculty or university. Oh, at my hostel and I don't really feel comfortable. But then these complaints keep, kind of goes away in a few months' time. But then, especially if you move into a remote area, sometimes it can be challenging for you to adapt to this. And that's also something you had to think about. The last one is the most important one to us and to many difficulties in finding employment. It is there in most of these countries, especially Finland, is they said to have one of the highest, if not the highest, unemployment rate in the whole of the European Union. But then our way of looking at this is completely different. It's sometimes controversial. I've received some negative remarks about my thoughts when I publicly explain this. But then the way I look at it is, it's not something new. It's been that way for a very long time. But what happened is recently there's a sudden increase of Sri Lankans going into these countries with the expectation that these are somehow equivalent to some of these English speaking countries. You can go there, for an example, if you think about a country like Australia, there's plenty of Sri Lankan subcontractors under whom you can, it's fairly easy to find something, some work. But it's not going to be the same in these European countries. And our advice is that, especially most of you, I know you are already established in Sri Lanka, you're probably in your late 20s or early 30s, sometimes even, in your late 30s or early 40s. Most of you have already established in Sri Lanka. So if you are leaving your career to go into a foreign country, our advice is to always prepare financially to be able to live in these countries on your own, at least for a considerably long time, let's say 6, 8, 12 months, because that will give you some time to transform yourself into a person who can find employment in these countries. I can give you one recent example. Just last year, we had a client. She went to Tampere University. Her husband had a background in forklift driving. And her husband, once, he arrived in Sweden, he tried to apply for plenty of vacancies, and he ended up with a company that actually helped him to get into Tampere University of Applied Sciences to complete a trade course without paying anything. And he's been paid a small allowance to complete the course. So his job offer is contingent upon completing that training program. So our advice is you have to, because Finland at the same time has some advantages as well. For a first world country, I personally think that's probably one of the easiest countries to become a long-term resident. They ask you to complete an academic qualification, 2-year qualification, live in the country, a former public research university, by the way, 2 or 3 year qualification, bachelor's or master's. That's just one route. There's plenty of other routes. I'm explaining about, having a credential from a public research university. The credential is required. 4 years of continuous residency is required, and Finnish language is required at the elementary level or A2. You have 4 years to get this done. So, for someone who can wisely plan the process, I don't think it is that difficult to fulfill these three requirements. You complete the credential you go there for. You learn the language to the elementary level, A2. You have 4 years to do that. And you live in the country for 4 years. No other requirement to obtain permanent residency. That's just one example. Compare this with many other countries, and you will notice this is one of the most feasible options available to become a long-term resident. But then, if you go to Finland with the intention of repaying your tuition fees from the day one, repaying your expenses from the day one, and applying for student support, all these unemployment benefits available, if you go with that mindset, there's very high chances that you will get stuck without a clear pathway and end up being disappointed. And the truth is, hundreds of, probably like, or maybe a few thousands of Sri Lankans, they have now got caught up in this dilemma, because they go there with the intention of making money from the day one, and then they end up being disappointed, because they always try to compare this with some of the mainstream countries. I would say these English-speaking mainstream countries where most of the Sri Lankans go for their studies. But it's somewhat of a different scenario for Sweden. In Sweden, I don't think finding a job, for survival is that much of a problem, but it also can take some time. You have to prepare for that financially. At least you live there for a few months. But then surviving in Finland compared to Sweden is slightly a different story. But then problem with Sweden is they have imposed a higher salary requirement to be able to apply for a work permit. So I highly recommend Sweden for those who have come from engineering, technology, or science related, or software or ICT related background, because they do really have opportunities in countries like Sweden, heavily industrialized. I have spoken to at least like 6 or 7 clients during the last month who went to Sweden through us during the last year, and the vast majority of them actually already work in their own industries. So it's full of opportunities in some of these technical and ICT related industries. But then again, the problem with Sweden is they used to allow anyone to apply for a work permit with the minimum wage until like 6, 7 years back. And they change it. for about, I think, 2 or 3 times. The salary kind of kept going up from the minimum wage, because I remember we had some applicants and they applied for work permits using cleaning contracts. All you had to do is to find a job that pays you 13,250 euros. Sorry, with 13,250 Swedish kroners, and you are allowed to apply for a work permit. And now this has gone to 30,000, and they are in, currently in plans to further increase it to 35,000. So no longer it is possible for anyone with an entry level kind of a job offer to apply for a work permit in Sweden. But surprisingly, if you end up working in the software industry, if you work there as some sort of an engineer or technical officer or any kind of science and technology related occupations, all of these occupations will pay you more than that. So basically, if you come from that kind of a background, Sweden can be a very good option. For an example, I recently learned Stockholm is being called the Silicon Valley of Europe, because they do have plenty of startups and tech companies, and plenty of companies that even I didn't know they're from Sweden. For an example, our very own Ikman.lk has a Swedish connection, and Spotify and all these companies. So I think for anyone who comes from software background, I'm not talking about, again, entry level, or the type of people with a few months experience. If you have 5, 6, 7 years of experience, and if you know your skill set, if you're confident about it, Sweden can be an excellent option. So moving forward, now I want to talk about the advantages of studying in these countries. The first one, again, is no longer applicable, because I do not believe these are scholarship options anymore, but they still do have scholarships. So you can still apply, but the chance of being able to secure something is about 5 to 10%. But if you think about Finland, they offer what they call early bird scholarships, 2,000, 3,000 euros out of 10,000, 12,000 euro fee. These are not really like proper scholarship, I would say, but still, you can cut down your tuition fee by about 20%, 25%, 15% most of the times, even as of this year. Uh, what I see in these countries, one of the biggest advantages is probably social security benefits. If you think about unemployment benefits in Finland, the one I talked about before, I don't think any other Western country, or at least most other Western countries, are that generous. They have no reason to pay. My personal belief, I don't know if this will be so controversial, is that they don't have to pay anything at all, especially if you're on a student visa. But then they have it, which shows that they are generous with, international arrivals. And also, if I think about the daycare costs for small children, the school fees and all, you generally do not have to pay in any of these Scandinavian countries. And I see that as one of the biggest advantages, especially if you have kids. I remember we had a profile a couple of years back. I did not get to talk to that student. She had 5 kids. And when we posted her story, I remember there's someone who lives in Sweden was like, how on earth she can survive in Finland. There was a lady living in Sweden. She made a comment, how on earth she's going to survive in Finland with 5 children. That was her response. And my thought about it is I replied saying, well, she can at least have some hope to survive with 5 kids in Finland compared to most other countries. The idea is, imagine going into a country where you had to pay for daycare for 5 kids and then sending them to schools. It's not going to be feasible at all. So that is one of the biggest advantages I see in Scandinavian countries. They're very generous in terms of allowing immigrants to access some of these facilities, like hospitalized, paying your medical bills, especially in the event of a hospitalization, or allowing your children to access public daycares and schools, things like that. And unfortunately, the system has been abused by some of the immigrants going from various parts of the world, but then they allow most of the immigrants to access certain social security benefits. So if something goes wrong, you will not, have to come back to Sri Lanka instantly. You do have some sort of a support system in place. An ability to apply for a work permit even with an entry-level kind of a job offer. This is more like a theoretical term. I don't think in reality you can, for an example, apply for a work permit in Sweden with a job offer as a housekeeper. But if the salary requirement is met, you can most of the time still apply. So there's no connectivity between the kind of qualification you complete and the type of job you find in these countries, like some others. Accessible healthcare facilities, I already talked about it. Free education for your children, including state-funded daycare facilities, already talked about it. These are some of the key differences I see in these countries. And also the other point is very important, ability to study all vocational training in local language. I know for a fact that Finland, until a few months back, of a year back, they used to offer free education at the vocational level, even for some of the English medium programs, but not anymore, which is good in a way. The idea is if you really want to transform yourself into an employable person in these countries, you do have opportunities to learn the local language free of charge and to get yourself a skill, like a vocational skill, again free of charge. So let's say, for an example, if someone goes there for a master's level program or a bachelor's level program with a spouse, the spouse can, if they create some sort of 3 to 4 year plan, they can start working on that plan to acquire a skill that will pay them a higher amount of salary in these countries that will qualify them to apply for a work permit. So that's also there. And if you really want to plan the process well, you still can become an employable person. And the last one is inclusive system in place to absorb immigrants. Because of all of these reasons, we believe they still allow immigrants in large numbers, very generous with the visas. Like, for an example, if you think about refusal rates, I think these countries have one of the lowest refusal rates when it comes to resident permits. So if you have some enough capital, good intentions, and the willingness or the ability to transform yourself into a completely different person. Let's say, for an example, you work as a finance manager in Sri Lanka. I don't think you can work as a finance manager in a country like Finland. You have to transform yourself into another person or to obtain another skill set that will make you employable. So that's the basic. I'm being very honest with you about the down situation, and it's been that way for a very long time. But it's a different story if you master the language. I think it's going to be difficult, but if you master the language, there can be some possibility for you to find the same kind of an occupation there as well. I know for a fact that I had a client, Dushanti, who used to work at Union Bank. She went to Sweden a few years back, I think 6, 7 years back. She became a Swedish citizen last year, and she already worked in Sweden in the banking industry. Because she has worked on the language, she's mastered the language, I think, and she had extensive background in banking, and she has learned the right combination, language plus skills, so to be in that position. Moving forward, I would like to quickly cover things to be concerned of. One is you must either be on a scholarship or have the ability to pay at least for the first 2 semesters. Sufficient funds to cover up your living expenses, at least for the first 6 months or more. The average budget we expect you to have is about 1.8 to 2 million for a family of two, or at least 2.1, 2.2 kind of million rupees for a family of three, or at least 1.5 to 6 million for one person. But these are like bottom level figures, does not cover much of the costs involved other than basic accommodation and your basic groceries and utilities. But then again, you have to, if I quote this in euros, we recommend you to have at least like 600 around 600 euros or 5 to 600, depending on the location. There can be other like remote locations where this cost goes down for an individual, and then 750 to 800 or sometimes 1,000 euros for a family of two, and a little bit more for a family of three every month. Again, these are bottom level figures. It's not like you can have like a very high quality of life within this amount of money. This will cover basic accommodation and basic living expenses. And willingness to learn the local language and to make local contacts, that's also very important. I can share another story. I had this client who went to Sweden last year. He had a cybersecurity background. If I recall it right, he worked at MS. We recently had a chat and he told me something that stuck into my mind. He said, Chamak, I pretty much covered every single networking event related to cybersecurity in Stockholm. And, it happened to be that I'm the only person from Sri Lanka in most of these events. So but there's something I noticed about him before we had this conversation. I was trying to get hold of one of these headhunters from Sweden, and I noticed this person is a mutual connection of pretty much every single recruitment professional in Sweden that I was digging into. The idea is he has worked, his way to build up the right networking to be able to land a job. He told me he's already working in the industry as a cybersecurity expert in Sweden. So it's not, whenever I see these entities or posts like it's not possible to find jobs or it's very difficult to find jobs, my understanding of that is slightly different. The way I see about establishing in these countries, you either have to have some sort of capital to be able. For an example, I have a client this year. He runs his own medical billing business. The location does not matter to him. He can perform remotely, and he's super comfortable with completing his masters there, and then trying to secure a job offer, because with or without a job offer in Sweden or a job in Sweden, he can still survive. I understand there's plenty of Sri Lankans in Sri Lanka at the moment. They work for foreign companies. They earn in dollars. And if, for an example, if they move into one of these smaller Swedish towns or Finnish towns, all they have to do is they can cut down the living expenses as much as possible and complete the qualification. And then they can make use of the post-study time to look for a job offer. There are some possibilities for the vast majority. And again, it depends on the individual circumstances. So if you want to clarify this with us personally, feel free to call us. I'm going to leave the numbers after this. And the other one is ability to try securing a full-time job offer for the spouse. That's also one possibility, because not necessarily the main applicant always has to find a job offer. For an example, I've had combinations. The wife usually has some sort of humanities related degree, let's say Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Economics or one of these, non-technical subjects. She can become the main applicant. The husband comes from a technical background. He can join wife to go together there. So the husband will be able to find a job offer eventually and to apply for a work permit. So it does not have to be the main applicant who always apply for a work permit and later apply for a long stay visa. And last one is more like a request. You have to complete your studies entirely or find a legal pathway before discontinuing, because that's one of the primary reasons why these countries are changing their laws, because I've seen plenty of applicants. And I saw this news article, I think just last year or year before that. The higher education completion rate in Sweden is about 48%. So every other student do not actually complete the educational program they go there for, which can result in more harsher or strict regulations when it comes to visas. So how the application process looks like through us. I'll trash this a bit because I don't want to take so much of your time. 3 major steps. First is the assessment process. If you are to initiate the assessment, if you want to apply for a bachelor's, we need your O-levels, A-levels, and passport copy, along with our assessment fee, which is 35,000 rupees. If you want to apply for a master's, we need a copy of your degree cert, transcript, and passport, along with the assessment fee, which is 35,000 rupees. We also have what we call assessment application. I will share one with you by tomorrow. So if you send us these documents, or if you want to visit us in person, you can do it too. We're located at Udayshri City Complex. That's the key super building in Kiribati, second floor. Once you hand over the documents, in about a couple of weeks' time, we can get back to you with a list of options, all the course contents, and all exact documents we need from your end to process you further. So once we give you this list of options, you can pick yours, 3 to 4 from Sweden, and if you are adding Finland into the process, another 3 to 4 from Finland. Submit the supporting documents along with the actual application fee of 185,000 rupees. I understand it's quite a lot of money, but even if you apply for Sweden or even if you apply for both Sweden and Finland, this cost will remain the same. And we also encourage, if the two of you, let's say you're married and both of you are, bachelor's degree holders with classes, in that case, we recommend you to apply together because we enjoy receiving multiple offers and try our best to secure scholarships. To encourage this, we usually, if the husband and wife, they both come from good backgrounds, they both have classes for their bachelors, we encourage them to apply and we only charge from one person. So you just pay us one assessment fee and one application fee, and we'll still pay all your possible application fees and spend our time on the process for both of you for the same cost. The third step is obviously if we apply on time between mid-March to mid-April next year, we can receive all these admission decisions for both countries, decide what's good for you, pick that option, and then move ahead with the visa process. So here, I have given you a breakdown of the assessment process. Basically, we need your bachelor's degree cert, transcript, and passport copy along with our assessment application and the fee of 35,000. If you're applying for bachelor's, we need your O-levels, A-levels, assessment application plus 35,000 rupees. Once you hand over this, in under 14 days, we'll give you a list of options, course contents, and exact documents we need from you and to process you further. And then we continue to the application process. You can pick your options from our list, submit all actual documents, mostly in digital forms, like we no longer need any physical documents for these processes. And also pay our application fee of 185,000, which, by the way, guarantees you an admission. So we're liable to make a full refund of 185,000, although we have spent money on application fees and all, in case if we fail to secure an admission. Because what we do at the assessment stage is we evaluate your options and we filter out the ones we can apply with confidence. And as I mentioned before, if you have a class for your bachelor's or if you have the minimum requirements met, most of the times we can confidently process your application. And the next one is visa process. So there's some similarities between the Swedish and Finnish visa process, some differences. There are plenty of similarities as well. The first one I noticed is both are digital applications. So you no longer have to visit anywhere initially to lodge your visa application. There's very clearly defined processes involved. You visit the Migration Squad website for Sweden and Finnish Immigration Service Enter Finland website for Finland. You place your application and you pay your visa fee online, 1,500 Swedish kronor, so under 50,000 kind of an amount for Sweden. And Finnish visa fee has been increased 2 times during the last 2-3 years. The current visa fee is about 600 euros for the student, which comes about slightly over 200,000 rupees. About, if I'm not mistaken, 750 for the spouse, which again, I cannot recall the exact amounts because this increase happened a few months back. 750 for the secondary applicant on average. I think that goes up to 250,000 plus. And for a child, they're charging now, if I'm not mistaken, 300 or 350. Again, I'm not sure about the Finnish ones because that's the increase was a sudden one. So if you want to apply for Finland, the visa fee is always on an expensive side, but surprisingly, it's still cheaper than some of the countries. I'm not going to name them. The idea is you apply, you pay your visa fee, lodge your documents, and then for Sweden, two possible scenarios are there. They can either call you up for a biometric visit. The idea is they will say, okay, in order to process your application, we need to see you in person. If that happens, you have to go to the embassy in New Delhi with your passports, provide your ID, and then they will take your thumbprints and photograph from adult applicants. So you're free to come back. Once you come back, most of the times your visa will be processed without any interviews. The second scenario is they will say something along the lines of, we cannot provide a decision on your application without questioning you further. Contact the embassy, please, and secure an appointment. So you have to, in that case, secure an appointment and visit the embassy on time, on the date and time they have given, and they will question you. We can always prepare for that later on. And you had face to an interview. They take your biometrics at the same time, and then you are free to come back. Finland is slightly different. The biggest difference is they have a compulsory interview, which should not be a worry at all for a genuine student. The idea is you have to secure an appointment in advance, visit the Finnish visa application center in New Delhi, and then you have to face your interview, provide your biometrics, and then you can come back. And also, if the husband and wife are applying together, as of the current laws, you can still apply together. But the idea is you have to, because a couple of years back, or until a couple of years back, it was possible for you to book an appointment for everyone at the same time. But now the appointment system has been splitted. So there can be instances where the main applicant has to go first and the secondary applicant has to go on another date. But other than that, the process looks more similar to that of Sweden. In both cases, if your visas are granted, you can collect your resident permit cards because they no longer issue paper visas. These plastic biometric resident permit cards for a Sri Lankan entity. For Sweden, it's usually the Swedish consulate office, and for Finland, it's VFS. So I would like to quickly have a recap about cost involved in the process. You have to, if you apply through us, think about our assessment fee, which is 35,000. Application fee, 185. Visa fees for Sweden is about 1,500 Swedish kronor, so under 50,000 kind of an amount. For Finland, it's 600 euros for the main applicant, 750 for a spouse, and about 350, if I'm not mistaken, for a child. Air tickets, there's two types of air tickets involved here. The type of air ticket you need to go to New Delhi, usually a little bit less or more. I think around 100,000, less or more. And then you have to have another air ticket to go from Colombo to one of these major destinations, Stockholm or Helsinki mostly, which will cost you another 250 to 300,000 on one-way ticket, or slightly less than that. And then there are other expenses. There's no much other expenses, but if you visit New Delhi, obviously you may have to spend some time there, so you have to pay for your accommodation. They do have a legalization process, especially if you are married or if you have children. They want you to legalize your marriage certificate and the birth certificate of the child. For Sweden, there's no such a requirement. And on top of that, we also charge a service fee because we don't get paid from that end. And our service charges are usually 350,000 for the main applicant and extra 100,000 for the co-applicant. And in case if you have a scholarship for at least 50% of the tuition fee value or more, we charge about 450,000 from the main applicant and extra 100,000 from the co-applicant. In case if your scholarship value is below 49%, or if you decide to go in as a fee-paying applicant, you pay us 350,000 plus 100,000. And to align our policies with that of the Scandinavian countries, we don't charge anything from children. And moving forward, I would like to quickly talk about pathways of settling down, because end of the day, that's the key intention for the vast majority of us. So there are two major ways you can use to settle down. One is to apply for a work permit. As I mentioned before, the current requirement to apply for a work permit in Sweden is about 30,000 kronor. They're going to further increase this to 35. But still, it should not be a worry if you have extensive experience related to technology or science. But if you come from other backgrounds, you have to either ensure you're willing to transform yourself, or else you have a spouse who actually come from one of these experience or one of these backgrounds. In Finland, it's currently at around 14,000, if I'm not mistaken. But then the whole idea is you secure a work permit, and then when you spend about 4 to 5 years' time on a work permit, you can apply for permanent residency. And the other pathway is to go through a PhD, which is my favorite most method, because the moment you secure a PhD, it will be considered as equivalent to employment. So in most cases, you can naturally fulfill that residential time period requirement to become a permanent resident later on. So these are the two major methods. But then on top of this, you also have other avenues. For an example, if you run a business in Sweden, the last amount I remember is about 450,000 Swedish kroners. I don't exactly know about the current rate, but if you run your own business, create one employment opportunity, and run that for a continuous time period of 2 years, you can still qualify for PR. They might change this in future. I'm not sure if they have recently changed it, but they do have some other avenues as well, especially if you come from sort of an entrepreneurial background, that might work for you as well. So apart from Sweden and Finland, I quickly wanted to cover about an alternative option we can offer in this year itself. If you want to apply, if you, let's say for an example, if you have completed some sort of HND or SLEAT qualification, or some sort of TTI or NDT qualification, you can apply for bachelor's final year in Malta. It costs like about 6,500 euros, feasible option, but then the disadvantage they have is they don't allow dependents. But then if you are an individual applicant, or if you feel comfortable completing your master's like MBA in under 1 year, and then making use of their post-study time, which is 6 months, to look for a job offer. In fact, they may have some, better opportunities to find job offers in the service sector, because it's mostly like tourism and banking and finance-driven economy. It can be a feasible option, and we can get you admitted for the September intake. No other requirements, IELTS or anything, and we don't charge anything as well, because we get paid from that end. The other one is our latest addition. We always wanted to find another option that's feasible for family applicants. So we tied up with this university in Spain, which happened to be the oldest privately owned business university in Spain, called ESIC. They are also a member of Association of MBAs, and they have promised us to deliver accept Sri Lankan students with a by default 25% scholarship. And they do have very reasonable tuition fees. For an example, if you're applying for a bachelor's, the average tuition fee for a bachelor's is about 7,500 once the scholarship amount is reduced. And 7,500 is pretty reasonable if you think about it. For master's level programs, these are after scholarship figures. They have the IMBA, Master of Business Administration, which is 22,000 euros. Very expensive if you think about it, but it's one of the AMBA accredited ones, so it is expensive. The lowest tuition fee they have is for the program in international trade and business, and they also have a program in marketing management. So it's a good option if you are a family applicant and you want to go in this year itself, because their next intake for masters is of September, and for masters is in October, and for bachelors is in September. And there are some pros and cons in the process. The biggest advantage is they only require to pay a tuition fee deposit of about 2,000 euros. So that will bring down your entire initial cost to under 1 million. The tuition fee deposit, the visa fee, air tickets, no need to visit New Delhi because we have the BLS application center in Colombo. So this will put you in a position where you can apply for your master's and fly out of the country this year itself for under 1 million rupees. you still have family reunification rights, but the family needs to apply once your visa is granted. But if you plan things in advance, you can still try to go together at the same time. But then that is about the initial cost. Once you go there, every trimester or every 4 months, you have to pay your tuition fees. Let's say, for an example, if you end up going there for international trade and business or international marketing management, you have to pay 2,000 euros, but you're left to pay another 11,000 euros, which is quite a lot of money. But then you have to pay this every 4 months. So obviously, you're not going to earn that money in Spain. But if you have that money to be paid out of your pocket, and if you want to move out of Sri Lanka early on, and if you're looking for an option where you can easily settle down, because Spain is also one of the most generous options, they require you to have 4 years of continuous residency to apply for loan stay visa, and your study time, which is 1 year anyway, um, will be considered as well, but they consider 50% of the study time. So you get 6 months there, you get your post study time. They have recently increased it to about 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. It used to be 1 year. And they're also very generous about offering work permit. They don't have that harsh kind of salary ranges and all to secure a work permit. And in fact, it's known as one of the most lenient countries in the European Union to offer loan stay visas. So it can be an option if you are looking for something feasible and something that you can, an option you can go along with your family members. What I can do is I'm going to send you information about Sweden and Finland tomorrow. If you guys have any questions about the process related to Spain, feel free to give us a call and we'll discuss about it in details. And that's the end of the session. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. You can either verbally ask them or send me a message in the inbox and I'll clear it up for you. Okay, I will see the first question. Could you please explain the available master's degree opportunity in allied health sciences, especially in physiotherapy? Well, in these Scandinavian countries, Mr. or Mrs. Vijayakon, we don't have that many options related to physiotherapy as such. Very limited options, especially at the master's level, if that is what you're looking for. The closest widely available option is probably public health. Because the very difference in these countries is your option English medium, because they have their own language. So most of their programs are delivered in their own language. But at the same time, they do have English medium programs that are generally open to international students. But when we find our options from a limited number of English medium programs, our options are also going to be limited. So they don't freely have physiotherapy related masters or bachelors as such. They can be one or two programs, but you also have to feel comfortable applying for related options like public health, for example, if your intention is to go there. And I hope that clarifies your question. Nimeshan Shanmugam has a question. Is there a possibility to get a fully funded PhD? Well, all PhDs are fully funded anyways in these countries. You don't have to pay anything. You paid a reasonable stipend to cover up your expenses, but then it's competitive to get into. Our advice is, Mr. Shanmugam, if you have completed your bachelor's and master's, what you can do is you can get hold of the websites of these universities where they mention ongoing PhD vacancies or studentships, mostly under careers or employment sections of their website. You can try to apply directly. If you think about Finland, the process is more clearly defined. The idea is you have to find a research supervisor, obtain a supervisor statement, and then you can apply through a portal called Study Info FI directly and try to secure an offer. But it's highly competitive. For example, even I myself nowadays looking for a PhD, and I know it's very competitive. But then, if you have completed your bachelor's and master's, that's the way to do that. We cannot facilitate that process. For example, if you are willing to go for a fee-paying option, we can certainly remember I mentioned about Malta. They have a DB option, Doctor of Business Administration, 9,000 euros every year, 3 years. But then, if you are looking for a more like a proper research-oriented doctoral level program, you don't have to pay anything. So, and they will pay you a stipend for living expenses as well. The idea is you have to get hold of multiple opportunities and continue to gather the evidence requirements and continue to apply for multiple options across a certain period of time. And then you can receive an offer. As a third party, we cannot do anything at the doctoral level except enrolling you with a fee paying program like the DBA, which I mentioned, which can be a good option if you come from a business background. But then for the vast majority, I don't think it'll be a feasible one. So thank you for your understanding. And thank you, Ms. or Mrs. Vijay. Kalani also has a question. How about MSc ID programs? Well, there's plenty of them, Kalani. You do have everything under the sun. If you want to, for an example, this year we had a client applying for a master's in artificial intelligence. He had a 25% scholar as well from Sweden. You have like everything imaginable: IoT, AI, machine learning, quantum computing, ICT. In fact, Sweden is full of IT related programs, and I think they have a better combination than some of these mainstream countries as well. And Nimeshan also, okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Nimeshan. Shamat Sarah has a question. Can I know possible masters for cosmetic science? Very limited. You may have options like industrial chemistry and things like that that can be somewhat related to these fields. But then I've never seen anything related to cosmetics at a public research university. I've noticed some programs like beauty care and all, especially at some of the universities of applied sciences in Finland, but not at the master's level though. So, do we have any other questions? Okay, looks like we don't have that many questions today. Yes, Mr. Kabil, are you trying to say something? Okay, so looks like that's it for today. So thank you so much. What I'm going to do is I'll send you the instructions for Sweden and Finland within the day tomorrow with a link to this recording. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. We continue to accept new applications from 1st of June onwards. The earlier you apply, that will allow us, some more room to organize all the information properly, and that will also allow you to work on your English proficiency test course if required. So if you have any questions, feel free to talk to us using the number shown. The first one is 0762803838, 0770287872, or you can simply reach out to me on WhatsApp using the number 0715607333. And I will send you some instructions tomorrow about Sweden and Finland, just in case if you need to know about any information, anything at all, feel free to reach out to us. If you want to initiate the process, feel free to come see us on or after 1st of June. And thank you so much for your time. And I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you all.